So this may be a bit of old news from February of this year, but shortly after the GoldenEye remaster for the Xbox Live Arcade was leaked, the one game I've been wanting to get a hold of for years from Rare also leaked, albeit in a very broken and nearly unplayable fashion. This game is Dinosaur Planet, the original vision Rare had before it became Star Fox Adventures. What do I think about it? Let's find out. This video is sponsored by the coldest water. Honestly, with the pandemic and me personally making the attempt to be healthier, having a bottle of water this size has really helped me to start drinking more water as opposed to soda. I've made it my personal goal to drink at least one full bottle a day, and it's honestly helped me cut down on tossing out water bottles every day at my morning job. It's really great having my drink cold throughout my whole work shift and my ice being completely unmelted. Not to mention it keeps your drinks cold for up to 36 hours, which really helps for this blazing hot summer. It also gives me that comfort knowing that I have the insurance of not only keeping my drink cold in the summer, but keeping my drink hot in the wintertime when I sit back and relax with some hot chocolate. For up to 12 hours if I'm an overachiever. Not to mention this is one of the first bottles I've owned like this that has a straw, so that's an added bonus for gas mask wearing nerds like me. Links are in the description and the comment section for those of you who want to check it out too. And for those of you out there who want this specific kind of bottle, this is the coldest 32-ounce sports bottle. So as of late, I've noticed that the Let's Rants have been covering some pretty negative topics, so today I wanted to touch on one that's pretty positive in my eyes, and honestly one that I've wanted to talk about for quite a while. So back in February of this year, a user on Twitter got a hold of a build of the cancelled Dinosaur Planet game by Rare for the N64. This is the second Rare leak that we've encountered in a year's time span, with the GoldenEye remaster for the Xbox Live Arcade leaking just a few months prior to this. For those of you who are unaware of what this game actually is, Dinosaur Planet was an original game by Rare, among one of their many highly successful Nintendo 64 titles, that was eventually transitioned over into a Star Fox title later in development. This was actually the last Rare title that was made for a Nintendo platform because the Microsoft buyout happened shortly afterwards. This title is now known as Star Fox Adventures, which was released in 2002 for the GameCube. The reason behind this is because Miyamoto saw the similarities between Saber and Krystal, the game's main characters, and the ones in the Star Fox universe, and because of this it was reworked into a Star Fox title that would also launch with the Nintendo GameCube. The build that was acquired by the Twitter user Forest of Illusion was dated to the year 2000, which was at the very end of the Nintendo 64's lifespan, and 1 year before the release of the Nintendo GameCube. At a glance, judging by the in-game model of Saber basically being just a prototype for Fox and Star Fox Adventures, and some of the voice acting being transitioned from Saber to Fox, this build of the game was most likely in the process of being changed into Star Fox Adventures at the time. But overall, this seems to be just a quick palette swap and some voice line changes in some instances, because all the environments remain different from the ones seen in the GameCube title, with some similarities here and there, but the map geometry remains completely unique. In some of the dialogue, you can actually see Saber being mentioned in the subtitles rather than Fox, because this hadn't been changed yet, and the HUD icon is still Saber, and it didn't have one unique to Fox yet. It's very likely at this point in time they were using what they already had as just an experimental playground for what they could potentially do when they transitioned to GameCube hardware. Now, save for the few changes in the lines and the model and a couple other things, this is definitely what Rare wanted to make originally. The original story seems to remain intact, and the build seems to be shortly before they transitioned to working with the GameCube hardware. A lot of what we see matches up with some of the early trailers and gameplay footage that was shown off before the game was actually reworked into Star Fox Adventures, and it was still going to be released as Dinosaur Planet for the N64. One of the main characters, Krystal, whom a lot of the internet is familiar with for both right and wrong reasons, was to actually debut in this game completely independent of the Star Fox series. Her, along with Saber, were to go on a quest filled with magic and adventure. This main character relationship sort of manifests in Star Fox Adventures, where Fox McCloud takes the place of Saber with the same voice actor, and Krystal having a slight modification to her backstory and an overhaul to her design. Unfortunately, in Adventures, you only get to play as Fox, as Krystal is exclusive to the prologue, and then becomes the damsel in distress for the rest of the story, Whereas in Dinosaur Planet, she had more of a defined role as a main character and went on her own journey alongside Saber. She even had her own dinosaur companion like you do with Tricky in Star Fox Adventures. You actually switch between the two characters with the Swap Stone NPC, which evolved into the Warp Stone in the Thorntail Hollow location in the GameCube title. Now that we're in the year 2021, and with the power of Dolphin and mods, it is very possible to actually switch Fox out with Krystal and play the entirety of the game as Krystal and to see how that experience would have played out. But it's still a little bit unstable, and because some of Fox's animations don't sync up with Krystal's model, it can get pretty awkward in some instances. Now, for those of you who have played Star Fox Adventures, some familiar locations make an appearance early on, like Cape Claw and Snowhorn Wastes, and Swapstone Hollow would eventually evolve into Thorntail Hollow. Some of the cutscene choreography is even the exact same as what you see in the cutscenes in Star Fox Adventures, albeit at a much lower quality and frame rate. Now, don't take me the wrong way. I love Star Fox Adventures. I think it gets a lot of unnecessary hate because it's not a traditional Star Fox title. I think the best way to enjoy it is to look past it and accept it for the kind of game it is. Just look at it as Dinosaur Planet and don't think of it as a Star Fox game. Just think of it as Dinosaur Planet with some spaceships. I know that's a bit difficult to really manage based on the fact that Fox is so in your face and Peppy and all the other cast, but I think that's a good way to enjoy the game. You just have to look at it as a dinosaur-themed Zelda-type adventure game. I think unfortunately some people fall into the groupthink mindset of hating the game because bigger YouTubers way back when started hating on it, and that was just a popular thing to do. But I think the best way is to play it yourself and form your own opinion on it, because I honestly highly recommend at least checking it out and giving it a chance, especially now that the original version of the game by Rare has been released to the public, and we could have seen what might have been had they actually released this for the N64. Sure, the version that we have is in a barely playable state, but you get the picture. Now, Star Fox Adventures does have its issues, like General Scales being a complete red herring and getting robbed of the final boss with him, even though he was set up through the entire story of being the main antagonist and being shoehorned into just being a puppet for Andros. But I'm not here to discuss whether or not Dinosaur Planet would have been better, or if Star Fox Adventures is a good game or not. I'm just stating my thoughts and experiences regarding the game and my discoveries related to Dinosaur Planet. I want to keep this as positive as I can. I think if anything, it's a good way to experience the last great era of Rare before the Microsoft buyout, and before we got things like Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. I think partially why the game gets a bad rep, besides the obvious one of it being an on-foot Star Fox game with very minimal R-Wing combat, is of course Krystal being particularly useless as a protagonist and essentially being furry bait. But to be honest with you, I actually prefer her design over her N64 one. Now, before you swarm the comment section and start accusing me of being a furry, I think the tribal look and not to mention the general graphical improvement suits the environment of the game a bit better. Because when you think about it, while Krystal is confirmed to be an alien to the denizens of Dinosaur Planet and not a native to the actual planet, coming in wearing some sort of biomechanical suit and shields would really discourage the locals to trust her, especially because the Sharp Claws had some of this crazy technology shown later in Cloud Runner Fortress. And to clear up the confusion, I'm talking about Star Fox Adventures Krystal here. Because to be honest with you, I don't know what her backstory is in Dinosaur Planet. I mean, for those of you who are Star Trek fans out there, this would essentially break the Prime Directive rule for alien races in Star Trek by basically showing them that she's fully alien. I mean, sure, she's a fox instead of a dinosaur, but there are stranger things on the planet, like the Swap Stones, for example, and the Krazoa race being a thing. I like what they had going for Krystal's design in Dinosaur Planet, but I think my opinion might be muddied due to the fact that I grew up with Star Fox Adventures, and I'm used to that design. I know that Fox doesn't really follow this rule at all, but then again, Fox already had an established design from the previous installment, and he's a mercenary who, in the story, is proven he could care less about the residents of the planet and what they think about him. I think overall the designs of Dinosaur Planet are more akin to Rare's N64 designs overall, with the cartoony look compared to Star Fox Adventure's more realistic approach. Could they have made Krystal's look a little bit less sexualized? Absolutely. But seeing how other species and characters look recently with the release of Star Fox Zero's anime, I guess her look fits a bit more in with that world than I previously thought. This is coming from a guy who grew up with the game and played it without knowing about the many things the internet has done to her. Honestly, I think it's pretty cool to have a telepath as part of the Star Fox cast later on in Assault. However, with Saber being turned into Fox, I was a bit disappointed to learn that Saber got his own separate weapon in the sword that he uses, where he's able to cast the same spells as Krystal and has a different moveset. I'm disappointed that we didn't get to see this sort of feature implemented in Adventures, and we were just given Krystal's staff as the primary weapon. I think it would have been pretty neat if maybe the staff would change to suit its wielder, so Fox gets the staff at first, but it transforms into the sword once it sees him as worthy. Or even using both, like Fox gets the sword at first and then later on gets the staff. Think like the Master Sword and then Big Oron's sword. Then you could potentially use both for different situations or vice versa. Because a big critique I have for Star Fox Adventures is that you have all these crazy and honestly really cool combos, but really all you have to do is mash the button multiple times until the Sharp Claw's health goes down, and occasionally block, because really there's no incentive for you to do these combos, because it takes generally the same amount of hits to get your enemy's health down. Most of it's just for show, and it's kind of a letdown that you didn't have more to this system. Now lastly, I'm going to talk about the performance, and you can definitely tell this was pushing the Nintendo 64's graphics to its absolute limit, to the point the game's performance is throttled to less than Ocarina of Time's level of FPS, which was set at a 20. This looks more akin to an early PS2 title graphically as opposed to a late N64 game. Full voice performances with emotions on the faces of the characters is just nuts for an N64 game. And the fact that this all fit, or potentially was going to fit, on a cartridge is just mind-blowing to me. Think, just a few years prior to this, we had Metal Gear Solid, which is considered to be one of the greatest games of all time and a cinematic masterpiece, where the characters' faces didn't move at all. They were just a static image where their heads would move every now and again, but they still conveyed the emotion in their voice acting. But the fact that this was possible on the N64 is incredible. I think coming out and saying that this game is better or worse than Adventures isn't a fair assessment to either of the games involved here, because Dinosaur Planet was not complete and it never will be, and the build we have will likely take a few years before we can fully enjoy it, where the mod community will add things like bug fixes and performance mods so we can all play it from start to finish without the game hard crashing on us whenever we enter a restricted area. There's some absolutely amazing and dedicated communities I've come across that are working to crack the game open and find out all the secrets it has, and of course eventually making the game completely playable from start to finish. The game is riddled with bugs at the moment and hard crashes, which I'll show a few examples here that I actually encountered while recording the footage for this video. Even when you're emulating this game on a high-end PC, you still want to emulate the expansion pack, because this game is not playable without it. It's definitely going to be a long road, but I have faith that we're going to get there. Regardless of the legality of all of this, I think that game preservation is an extremely important endeavor, and it has the same amount of importance as preserving old movies or old books. This is history, and I personally believe that there's nothing morally wrong releasing a title that is over 20 years old and never was released in any official capacity anyway, especially since this title evolved into a completely separate game franchise altogether. To be completely honest, I have to give my applause to the Nintendo Rare team from the late 90s, because this was definitely an ambitious endeavor for the time. So that's my rambling for today on this recent discovery, and I'm really excited to see more. Thanks everybody who tuned in, and I'll see you again soon.